Okay, hopefully that's enough time for everyone to get on and for us to get going. So, good morning, welcome. This will be the first live stream PD of the week that we will be hosting this week. And our goal in these PDs is to get everyone ready to start remote instruction, as was discussed in Mr. Koenig's memo yesterday. So fortunately, I think we're pretty well placed to get this in place, and we have some time to get everybody skilled and going, and at least feeling like this is a new way we're going to be working for a little bit, and that everybody feels like they have the skills that they need to do this. So before we get into the nuts and bolts, let's acknowledge a few things. First, this is a new experience for all of us, including George and Celia and myself, and all of your EdTech liaisons out there. We've never done remote broadcast PD either. I'm hoping it's going smoothly out there. I suspect I will get plenty of emails and communication about anything that went wrong today, and we welcome that. That's how we're going to get better. But there's a thing that I hope we can all keep in mind, just like we tell our kids who say that they can't, that this is something new and we're learning. All of us are learning. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to try things out and go, oh, that didn't work. But growth mindset is the key. You might say, well, I don't know how to use Google Classroom. I don't know how to use CSAR. I don't know how to use Screencastify. But the key word is yet. #yet. So we're hoping that all of us sort of keep that in mind. Be patient with yourselves. Be patient with your coworkers. And be patient with your students. We're all on this new journey together. And I firmly believe that ALISOL teachers, students, and our community in this time of crisis and uncertainty. So we're going to be doing these PDs all week, and they will likely continue on an ongoing basis while we're closed. I think it's important to keep in mind that it can feel overwhelming in a day or a week. In fact, you might not ever get it to the level where you feel like it's perfect, but that's okay. We're just taking the first step today. We'll take a second step tomorrow. We're trying to make sure that there's plenty of time for you to absorb the learning in the afternoons every day, and so that nobody feels too overloaded or too overwhelmed. So already we've had plenty of questions coming in. There you see the bit.ly link, which was emailed to you at 9:20 about questions on a Google form related to the podcast. I'm going to reiterate what was in the email, that questions at that form need to be about the live stream PD. If questions go in there that are not about that, we're just not going to have time to answer them during the broadcast. If you have more general questions around educational technology, you can see there, edtech@alisol.org. That goes to the entire department so that we can respond to you as quickly as possible. Some of these FAQs were covered in Mr. Koenig's letter to us yesterday, but I'd like to go over them again. And I might not have the perfect answer right now, but trust me, all these things are being looked at. The first thing, let's talk about access. Internet at home. As you saw in Mr. Koenig's letter, we are in the process of acquiring hotspots for families to check out so that we can continue to serve all of our students while they are at home for this closure. Had several questions about services like AR or Epic, and we are working with those vendors to see what we can do. A lot of EdTech services companies and a lot of vendors have opened up what are otherwise paid services through the end of the summer. And right now, my team, George, Celia, and I, are putting together a website reference for you, and we will be compiling those there. I want to thank all of the teachers, and it's really too many to name, But I want to thank all of you who are finding those resources and making sure to share them with us. Those will make it onto the website, and it's a great example of how we are pulling together as a community. The next one is Google Meet. How are you going to connect with your students and families while you're away? Right now, unless IT has changed without me realizing it, but right now we are planning on opening Google Meet so that we can either live stream to our kids like this, which is one-way communication, or so that you can have video calls with your kids over their devices. We're getting that ready for you to do, and you will be able to have one-on-one calls with your students. You'll be able to have whole class live lessons if and when you're ready for that. But we want to make sure that we keep that connection to our students. And we'll talk about that again later when we get into why we're doing remote online instruction. Got lots of questions about YouTube. We're definitely looking at that. And we want to do that in the safest way possible so that our kids are, as much as we can, focused on educational content as opposed to just the entire vast universe of YouTube. Just because we're at remote instruction does not mean we don't still have our obligations to safeguard them when they're online. Screencastify. In the needs assessment, a lot of you said, I don't know how to Screencastify, use Screencastify, and we'd like to use it. We will be going through that at the end of today's PD. It's really quite a simple tool. Additionally, the free version of Screencastify has a 5-minute limit on it, and we're working on purchasing the paid version so that you will not have that 5-minute limit, but so your students, when they're doing their demonstrations of knowledge at home, they can use this tool as well, and they won't be restricted to 5 minutes either. Let's talk about teacher support. So the EdTech department, being myself, Celia, and George, we're going to be doing all those things you see. Livestream PD is going to be happening every day this week. I promise today will be the longest. We won't go this long every day, but we're getting everybody oriented and situated. We will be available for remote and in-person support after this week. We will let you tell us how you prefer to be supported. If you are observing social distancing and would rather not have us there with you in your class, we will use Google Meet to assist you, or Google Hangouts. If you are okay with us being there with you, that is what we're. And let's not your liaisons. Each site has an EdTech liaison, and you can turn to them for support at this time if you need something more immediately. Very proud of this whole department. Everybody's been working really hard to try and get all of us ready for this, and I would like to give my entire team a shout out at this point. Let's not forget our site leaders, our principals and assistant principals, your academic coaches. They are there to support you as well. And remember that this is a brand new situation for all of us. And let's just try to extend each other the most amount of patience that we can. The entire district office stands behind you. From the cabinet level, all of the ed services and whole child directors, technology services, the director of food services, Ms. Vargas, today, and her team are getting ready to do sort of a drive-through service so that our kids can still eat. So we are mobilizing all of our resources right now to continue to serve our families. Dr. Purnell and I will be working on supporting the community as well. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So what about our parents and families? Well, as I said, food services will be making pickup available for all of our students, all of our families. The Educational Technology Department and Dr. Purnell and her staff at the Family Resource Centers will be working together. In fact, we're putting together a parent guide. You know, our parents are looking at having their kids home for an extended period of time, and we want to make sure that they understand this is not vacation time, that once we start remote instruction, it's real instruction. We are expecting our children to carry out these assignments, and we don't want to lose all the ground that we have gained academically and social emotionally as we move into this new mode of teaching for however long we need to be in it. Dr. Purnell told me yesterday, or maybe it was Saturday, that the ESL adult learners are getting ready to go remote as well. So as our children are getting ready to receive remote instruction, so are some of our adult community members going to be in their English as a second language classes online. Again, we're building a parent guide collaboratively with the AFRC, and Dr. Purnell and her staff will be translating it for us into Spanish. Gotten a lot of questions about TK and pre-K and special ed, and there are pieces, and these are among them, that we are still working very diligently to figure out, and I promise that we will communicate those to you and to all of our stakeholder groups as soon as we have those solutions. So let's start talking about remote instruction. So why are we doing remote instruction? Well, first, let's talk about what the alternative looked like. Well, we could do nothing, but that's not really serving our families, and it's not serving our children very well. You might be talking to folks in other districts across the state or literally across the country, and you might hear about packets or big piece of work. So if we send home packets and that's all we did, we wouldn't be gaining anything probably, because we can't teach through just paper, and we can't really count on our families to lead teaching. So the best we can hope for, the absolute best we can hope for, is to just hold steady at wherever each kid is. Additionally, looking at this for our colleagues who are talking about social distancing, if we send paper home and we're expecting students to do it and return it, then we need to take that paper back that's been handled in the home. And I'm sure you can guess where I'm going with that. Second is, let's talk about all the hard work you and your students have done already this year. I know that every single teacher watching this has made gains with their students, academically, socially, and emotionally. And this is the best way that we know how right now to try to maintain those gains and then to grow even farther. If maintaining were enough, then we might consider just packets, but it really isn't. You've worked so hard. Why we don't want to lose that ground in this time of this closure. So really, it's the best way to keep them growing academically that we know of right now. And the last part is to keep kids and families connected. Now, what you can see below is a screenshot from Mrs. Gonzalez, fifth grade teacher at Frank Paul. Frank Paul represent. Okay, so I'm a co-teacher in her Google Classroom. I've had the pleasure of working with her students directly. But the student, Leslie, and this was sent Sunday, and we haven't even had a day of closure yet on Sunday. As you can see, it says, Mrs. Gonzalez, when are we going back to school? I miss my friends in school. Remember what school means to our kids. Remember what you mean as their teacher to our students. We are doing what we can to keep them connected to you so that the teacher and the student is connected, but also we're going to try to share with you ways to keep your kids connected to each other in positive learning ways and to keep our families connected. And I think that this can't be underestimated, that your kids, your students, look to you in times like this, in addition to their families, for comfort and information. And we want to continue to provide that for them in a way that's safe for them and safe for us. So let's talk about what remote instruction is. So it is learning that occurs away from the traditional classroom. You know, obviously, it's providing learning materials in many formats. We're not strictly saying at this point that it all has to be one way or all another. I think while we're learning, while we're building this plane, while we're flying this plane, we're going to try and experiment with lots of different things. It's supporting students by giving them feedback and online support and materials, checking in with them. And I mean checking in with them as the little humans that we are given care of when they come to our schools. And last, as I've tried to stress, it's keeping kids connected to you and their classmates to try and feel like we are still a school community and a classroom community that you've been working all year to build. So let's talk about what it isn't. What it isn't for you is sitting in front of your webcam all day lecturing live. That's not going to be how this works. In fact, I think we're all going to get used to a different way of working. I think we're all, as classroom teachers, As a middle school teacher, I always used to say, like, I know what to do because the bell tells me what to do. Well, that's not going to really be how our day goes when we don't have students. So it's going to be a new way of working. But what we don't want it to be is you sitting in front of your computer for just hours and feeling like you have to live lecture all the time. We also don't want our kids just sitting in front of computers all day. We're seeing great examples from really all over the world where teachers send home lesson plans and they incorporate things like brain breaks or get up and move around for 10 minutes. And those are the sorts of things we need to think about, that it's not just the academic part, but if a kid is being held indoors by their parents, it's raining right now. Imagine 8,000 instances of rainy day recess in homes all over East Salinas right now, giving them reminders that they do need to get up and move their bodies. And that's so critical in our younger kids for their development. Next, it's not just packets of worksheets that students complete without support. We are going to continue to teach. We're going to continue to support our students. It's not what any of us are used to yet. Remember, #yet. So we will be all on this learning journey together. And lastly, it's not something we expect any of you to be perfect at. We are all going to be building this together and and making mistakes while broadcasting to the entire district together. But we're going to be building this together and trying things out and on this journey to get to a place of good instruction for our kids while they are not in our classrooms. So when do we get to start with kids? There you see an exact quote from Mr. Koenig's memo yesterday. The target date for the beginning of remote instruction for all students is April 1st. This date may move up or back depending on our progress. So working on that date, we have a couple weeks to get everybody feeling like they know what to do, that they have time to plan, that you have time to prepare, to collaborate remotely or in person, so that we can package together some real high quality instruction for our kids. So that's the takeaway here is, yes, it can be overwhelming, and yes, there's a lot to learn, but we're not asking you to do this afternoon. We're not asking you to be ready to start instruction online right now. So let's start talking about what is the idea, what are the tenets of good teaching with remote instruction. Well, they're pretty much the same as teaching. It's just the delivery method that changes. So my team and I have been collaborating with other ed tech professionals and education professionals from all up and down California. And this was borrowed from La Habra Unified School District in Southern California. So this is an example remote instruction plan. This isn't a lesson plan so much as it is almost like a theory of action, right? So we have 4 components: communicate with your students, teach them, connect, and assess. You think of communicate with your students in the classroom, we maybe do this as our morning meeting or morning announcements. Teach, well, you know, lesson delivery, you know what that is. Connect, you connect subconsciously and so naturally in the classroom. You check in on a kid, you look at their face. If they look stressed or really happy, you talk to them. Well, we're going to figure out ways to do that remotely as well, because that's such a vital part of connecting and teaching with our children. And then assessing. Use assessment data to see what they've learned, and then to inform our teaching moving forward. So moving on, so let's take a look at connect. So these are all suggestions. These are examples, and please hear the word suggestion. All right, so one way to do this is to post an announcement at least once per week on Monday to provide your kids an overview of what the week is going to be like. Daily check-in and reminder posts or videos are also a good idea. You can use Screencastify to do this, Google Classroom, and Seesaw. Now, quick note, there'll be sets of tools under each one of these 4 pillars, if you will, and they can apply across to each of the pillar. We're just lining up some examples. Additionally, this sort of this graphic organizer will be available on our remote instruction website, which we are expecting to go live on Wednesday at the latest. We'll let you know if it's sooner. So the teach component. So we are, just like you do now, you're going to create standards-based lessons that are aligned with our curriculum. and post them to Google Classroom or Seesaw, or both if you need. So we're going to jump out and give a little shout out and take a look at one. So this is a shout out to Miss Elena Clemente, a second grade teacher at Creekside. Okay, so she kicked it into high gear. She is one of the 2 ed tech liaisons for Creekside. And I think the way Ms. Clemente manifested her anxiety was to get right to work and to start planning. So for her second grade class, here is an example. There is no one way to do this. I just wanted to show you what this might look like. Now, this could be sent out through Seesaw, or if parents wanted to pick this up in print, and you can see it uses Connect Ed, it uses Prodigy, it uses Google Classroom, it uses Lexia, it uses the tools, some of the tools that you're familiar with, just kind of in a new way. Now, for our middle grades, this is actually borrowed from the American school in Japan, where I think this is 4th grade. And this was their learning plan. And you can see you probably can't read it yet, but again, this link will be available. And you can see reading, and they're talking about minutes. Writing and word studying, they're talking about minutes. Math. And for our older kids who maybe need that sort of guidance and to understand how much time that they should be spending on each thing, that could be a way that this looks. Not the way, a way. Okay, back to here. So next, we're talking about connecting. So it's a good idea to provide at least 2 times per week for students to share their learning with their classmates and to interact with you. That could be interacting with you whole class, or that could be interacting with you one-on-one. And as the week goes, and this week won't be the only week of Livestream PD, and it will be every day this week, that pace might slow in the coming weeks. Details to follow. So how can you do that? Google Meet is a great tool. Flipgrid is a great tool. But the connection is important, giving ways to continue to connect with their classmates and to continue to connect with you. Then assessment. How do we know if our teaching's been effective? And I think since we're all new to remote instruction, the assessment piece is going to be key to understanding how effective our instruction is and where we're going to need to reteach and maybe try different approaches in remote instruction. Once per week, try to gather data. This could be a Google form. It can be the question feature in Google Classroom, Illuminate, Kahoot and quizzes, or if you're having your kids create stuff, their learning artifact. That could be a video, that could be a little project, graphic organizer. There's lots of different ways to do that. They're just going to share that with you digitally. I hope I've stressed this enough, but just to make sure, don't forget about our kids. They probably miss you already. That 5th grader misses Miss Gonzalez and her friends, and that your classroom is their second home. So we're going to use Meet for live activities, which again can be whole class or one-on-one, excuse me. Remember the whole child. Yes, the whole child division, but also remember all of them, that they might want to talk to an adult outside their home about what's happening. They might want to have another friend to talk to. And then lastly, and I think this is an important piece, is there's nothing to say that using Google Meet through our students' devices, we can't connect with the parents. There's every reason in the world to continue to connect with our parents in this safe way online that is mutually convenient for both. Additionally, if our parents have smartphones, there's a Google Meet app which they can download for free on either platform, iOS or Android. So we're maintaining our way to keep connected to our community. So lastly, or coming up here towards the end, is this idea of a learning curve, and to allow yourself the space and time to learn, to make mistakes, to grow, to not be afraid of things. I saw an interesting post on Instagram encouraging teachers, you don't have to be camera ready, meaning like all put together every time you make a video to put out to your class. I think after the first few, you're just going to get over it, even those of us who don't like having our picture taken. But the idea is, like, this is what a learning curve looks like. And remember, we're all on this learning curve right now. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to throw over to George and Celia, who will be bringing you a longer version of PD, building a full ELA lesson using Wonders and our Google tools, sort of focused through Google Classroom. So take it away, George and Celia.
Hi, everybody. And so just so you know that George and I will be here. We intentionally left off our cameras just because we were concerned maybe about bandwidth or just tech glitches. And so we'll be here, but you won't actually see us. But since we'll be sharing our screen, we'll just go with that for now. But again, remember that you can use that Google form for any questions that you have about the PD as it's happening. We'll be reviewing that as we go. And so if there's anything we can answer for you as we go, please use the form. We'll answer during the actual broadcast. If there's anything more general, you can also email us. I want to point out the bit.ly down at the bottom. So if you want a copy of this presentation, you can go ahead and go to that link. So it's AUSD lowercase RI is uppercase with a 1 for the first day of our broadcast. You might even want to take a quick note and jot it down if you're in your classroom, maybe on the whiteboard or on a piece of paper, just in case you need it later.
And just, hi, this is George. Just on a quick note, why you might want to have this, because there's a lot of live links to resources in this presentation that you might want to access later on or as we're going through this. Also note that Celia and I are using one microphone, so even though she's talking, it shows that I'm talking, so we just wanted to point that out to you. All right, Celia, back to you.
All right, so hopefully that was enough time for the bit.ly. If you needed it, we'll make sure to email it out if you need it later, no worries. So a quick overview of what we're gonna be doing today during our session. So we're gonna go through some essential features and settings of Google Classroom. We're going to take a look at some tools you might want to consider while you're lesson planning, including Docs, Draw, Slides, and Screencastify, which I know Josh has already mentioned a little bit. We're going to go through the bulk of the presentation, going through our design process. And so we picked out some key components of a lesson design, including engagement, maybe some read alouds, a main reading, and some writing for language arts. Keeping in mind, and I just want to reiterate what Josh has mentioned before in terms of these are suggestions, like all these ideas that George and I will be handing out through the department, like they are just suggestions, they're ideas, they're what we would do going through the process, but a lot of you have already hit the ground running, so to speak. And so just keep in mind that these are just ideas. And so we'll give you some examples from us. We'll go through what the workflow might look like and some best practices, including due dates, topics, some feedbacks for students. And then we'll leave you with some resources, some that are already made and some that are upcoming, just so you make sure you feel prepared. Sounds like we're getting a question in, so we're going to take a quick pause to field the question.
So I'm just going to use George and Celia's mic. I've had a couple of questions about bit.ly. Bit.ly is open in our district, but if you're on the hard line, if your computer is connected in the hard line and you can't get through to bit.ly, that would be why. If you can unplug your hard line and get on Wi-Fi, that would be the issue. And Dr. Purnell, yes, we are monitoring the questions. All right, back to you.
But yeah, remember that like if anybody does need the bit.ly later, we'll make sure to email it out too. So either way, we will get it to you for sure. So we're going to get started with some essential features and settings. And so we're going to hand this off to George.
All right, here we go. So as Celia said, one of the things we took a look at is, we can't do this like we would normally do this in the classroom. So what are some pieces here that would be essential? So before we get to that, we looked at some feedback of a form that went out to all of you talking about Google Classroom, how comfortable you are using it. And actually, we were pleasantly surprised of the responses. However, we know that not all of us at the same place. So really quickly, we're going to go through some of the settings and a quick overview of Google Classroom for those of you that kind of need a little bit of a refresher on here. So starting with that, we're going to go ahead and these are the sections we're going to take a look at. You know, the stream, classwork, people, grades, class settings, and then account settings. So one point that we did want to point out is that during this presentation, we're actually going to be switching, because we're actually going to be demonstrating this live. I will be representing the teacher piece. So when, and I will showing you live how to do that. And then we'll cut over to Celia, who will be playing the part of the student. And again, some of you are already very familiar with that, but I know that we're not all at the same place. So starting with the stream. So the stream is basically the place where you as a teacher can make announcements to teach, you know, send a morning message or some kind of question for them, or just a hello on there. It's also, if you enable it, it's a place where students are able to have conversations. You know, think of it more like a little bit like a chat room on there where they can respond to each other, but you have the, you know, you have the control as to how open you want to leave that. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Most of your time will be spent in the classwork section on there. In this section is where your students will access the assignments and where you will post the assignments. You know, this way you can create the different types of assignments that you see here. Just note that we actually will be going into each of these and actually demonstrating each of these features as we go through this slide deck. But again, this is something that this is where you will spend most of the time. This is where most of the work happens. Okay. The people section is really important. First of all, just, you know, because we don't know where we are going with this, it's very important that if you have a class, you invite a co-teacher in there. We would recommend, or we would suggest that you invite your instructional coach or your administrator in case for whatever reason you need to be out and somebody needs to be able to manage the class while you are out. So this is where you would do it. You know, you would click on that and invite those individuals in. In addition, if for some reason there's any new student that for some reason is not in Google Classroom or you need to add them, you can invite them from this section here under the invite students down below. And finally, maybe you already have all your students in there and you have email addresses for your parents. This, if you want to invite them, invite guardians or parents to come in and see what's going on with their students, you can also do that from this page. So that's, again, the people section of Google Classroom. Finally, there's the grades section. In this section, just be aware that I would consider this a little bit more advanced. So if you're already ready, you've been using Google Classroom, this might be a way for you to use grades. But we know that if you're barely getting started with Google Classroom or you feel you're a beginner with Google Classroom, this might not be something that you're doing now, but maybe you are assessing and getting grades in your traditional manner that you do this. All right, finally, we want to talk about settings, and we want to kind of talk about two different kinds of settings. If you are in the classroom, like the image shows here, if you press the little cog, this will take you to the settings for this individual class. In here, some of the settings, while there's a lot of settings, some of the ones to consider are the ones where in the stream, oops, apologize there. In the stream here, you may want to change that to, and again, this is all on how comfortable you are and what kind of connection you want students to have to each other. Josh spoke to the need of students to be able to have contact with each other, whether virtually, since it can't do it in person. But again, that'll be up to you. You know, here are the 3 different ways that you can set this. Students can post and comment. That's pretty much, you know, free reign for them. Students can only comment, and then only teacher can post and comment. So again, we'll leave that up to you to decide how to adjust those settings. There's other settings that you see here, which we won't go over. But finally, if you make any change in here, be sure that you press the save button so that your settings are applied. And those are the class settings. There's another group of settings, and these are the settings to your whole Google Classroom account on here. And you get to that by pressing the hamburger icon here. And then you go down to the bottom and you will see the little cog here. You may have a whole bunch of lists of classes on here are my classes. And then you press the cog and then you have additional settings on here. This one might be important to you because you might want to be getting emails when notifications, if a student is sending you certain information, maybe when they comment, maybe you just want notification when you get a private comment. So those kinds of things. You have a lot of flexibility there on what you want to turn on and off. When you turn it on, down below, you will have a whole bunch of other options. And in addition to that, within this page, you also can have settings individual to each class that you have in Google Classroom. Okay, so again, this is different than class settings. These are account settings for all of the Google Classroom, for all the classes. Okay, Celia's going to talk to you a little bit about what tools to consider. So Celia, it's all yours.
Perfect. So again, as you think about what tools you might want to consider, we're going to go through some examples and suggestions, but again, they're up to you to make a final call on. So we're going to get started with Google Docs. And so here are some ideas on ways you can use Google Docs. So Google Docs, of course, is for word processing. And so these examples on their left, I took from my actual classroom. And so these were from students from last year's class. And so if you give them a writing assignment, of course, they could do their word processing on Google Docs. They can do their planning for their writing. The second example is from my classroom where we would make our plan color-coded with all of our planning still on a Google Doc. So that's still obviously an option. There are opportunities for collaboration with Google Docs, of course, and all the Google tools. If you were to have one Google Doc for all of your class, then like I did here in this example, then all of the students would be on the same doc and they could collaborate. In this particular example, we were studying the colonies, and so each student took a different colony and did some research on it, but this was made in collaboration with each other. You can also use Google Docs as graphic organizers. Depending on what kind of graphic organizer, Google Docs can lend itself very well to it. This is an example from my classroom. If you're in presentation mode, I want to encourage you to hover over these images, and if you see a little Mickey Mouse hand, you can click on that. It'll take you to either like the templates, so you can make a copy for yourself, or sometimes we've linked websites for your reference that you can go to. And so if you hover over them and they're clickable, that means that you have access to those too. So if anybody like wants this graphic organizer, again, it's something that I made for my classroom. You can go ahead and click on it, make yourself a copy. And finally, for Google Docs, it also presents a really good opportunity for teachers to connect with students and provide comments and feedback. So once a student were to do their work on Google Docs, then the teacher can go in and provide individual comments and feedback directly on the student's work. So that's, again, those are all just features of Google Docs. We're gonna take a quick pause for another question.
Mr. Barella from
Mr.
Barden
Barella. Yes.
is asking, is there a way to not get a ton of email notifications when kids are communicating and turning in assignments?
Good question. I'm going to back up to address that. Down at the bottom where George mentioned, so again, that's going to be in account settings. Go to I call them pancakes.
I call it a hamburger.
You know, this little thing right here. Go down to your settings. Down in this area, you're going to either turn notifications on or off just at first. So just say whether or not you want them. In order to control how many of them that you get, if you're just thinking this is just too many, you can turn off which notifications you don't want. So if you don't really want to get notified for comments on your post, then you can turn that off. If you don't want to be notified when somebody mentions you, you can turn that off. If you only, for example, want private comments from your students, then you can just leave that one on and you'll get less emails. I'll also remind you that George mentioned, although it's not here on the screenshot, so I would encourage you to take a look at it on your own account, that down at the bottom here, if you would just scroll down, you're going to get a list of the classes you're enrolled in. And you can control which classes you get notifications for. So if you just don't want them at all, you can just turn them off completely. If you only want them for certain classes, down at the bottom, you'll be able to either toggle on or off for specific classrooms also. So
just a quick note, if you don't want to get any notifications, you go ahead and you move that blue, the blue where it says email, you move that off and you won't get any notification about anything.
Right.
Okay, so hope that's helpful.
Yes. So we're going to go back to our tools and go to Google Draw. So Google Draw is a way it's very graphic oriented, I would describe it as. And so Google Draw lends itself very well to graphic organizers. It's a little bit more flexible than a Google Doc for graphic organizers. And so here are a couple of examples of graphic organizers that were made on Google Draw. And so students would get a copy of these and they could use these for whatever text they're reading. If you notice, these are live links. And so I linked a website where I took these from. So these aren't mine, but credit to Control-Alt-Achieve for anybody who knows the website. So if you want a copy of these already pre-made, there are a bunch of graphic organizers on there for you that are all made on Google Draw. And Google Draw also lends itself really well to more creative things. And so if you want students to, for example, like make an infographic or make a poster, make a diagram or a timeline. So all those things are much easier to do than on a Google Doc, for example. And so again, these are examples as well. So if you like want this template, for example, you can go ahead and click on that too. Next up to Google Slides. Google Slides, again, it lends itself really well to not just presentations for the teacher, but also student presentations. And so this example on the left is actually from my classroom again. And I actually had my students create the vocabulary slides for an Achieve 3000 article themselves. And so they would pick the article. I gave them the blank template, and then they would fill in the information. They would look up the words from the article. They would define them, use them in a sentence, and give a sentence frame. And so we would collect all those and then have this like support. If you want a copy of the blank template, it's linked on there. This middle one is a comprehension check. And so it's actually just a sorting activity. And so if you're in the lower grades and you want, again, just a quick comprehension check, this is just an example. You can ask students to sort from here. And this last one, again, like all of the Google tools that lend itself really well to collaboration. This one, I actually gave students this one slide deck per group. And so if you'll notice, there's actually names on here for their group, and then each person would take a different slide and fill out their information, but then together they would have one slide deck as a collaborative effort. Screencastify is already mentioned. Again, we're working on getting that for everybody without any of the free limitations, but Screencastifys are really well. Sorry, it looks like we have another question.
So there's been a question about
Screencastify. Oh, okay.
No, it's fine.
Perfect.
It's been a question about the timeline on Screencastify. The answer is as soon as we can, which is nice and vague. But honestly, if I had to ballpark it, I'm hoping by the end of the week at the latest.
And
Well, we're working on it.
And just so the comment is like, remember, you can it's usable right now. You can use it now. You just are limited to what you can do with it. So if you can start using it already, just as a quick tip, whenever you're creating videos or lessons, usually if you go over 3 to 5 minutes, people lose interest. So you don't necessarily want to record for 10 minutes or half an hour lesson. Mm-hmm. But just a little tip there.
So some ideas, again, quick ideas, because we're going to come back to Screencastify after this to go a little bit more in depth. But we can also use Screencastify for some read alouds. And so if you have an actual physical book yourself, you can do that. If you found something online, this particular example over here on the left, I believe this teacher was using a book on Epic. And so she was scrolling through and recording herself read it out loud. So this would be an example of a read aloud. If you're doing some kind of mini lesson, you could also record yourself and record your screen, similar to how we're doing right now. You would make a presentation, maybe in Google Slide, but then record yourself explaining the lesson as you click through the slides as a form of like a mini lesson. Again, this is a clickable link, so if you want to see what that looks like, please go ahead and do that a little bit later. I'm going to go down here at the bottom because we mentioned how communication is going to be key, and teachers can also use this to record themselves and maintain that communication with students and parents, just like a check-in, just a hello, how is everybody? So they have that connection to you. And I'm going to leave you with this last one, just because Screencastify isn't just a great tool for us while we lesson plan, it's also an excellent tool for students. And so you might want to think about how students can use Screencastify to create screencasts to demonstrate their thinking. And so the more we can make that thinking visible. In this example, I think I'm gonna give a shout out to Montebella's Mary Espinosa, because I totally took this from her. She had her students making screencasts of students reviewing their vocabulary for their unit. So again, these are all some great examples. We're going to switch it over to the process that we took, but there was a request before I hand it off to George. There was a request to restate the bit.ly. So I'm going to really quickly go back up to the first slide for anybody who may have missed it in the very beginning. So again, the bit.ly was bit.ly/AUSD in lowercase, capital R, capital I, 1. The RI standing for remote instruction. So AUSD remote instruction RI 1. All right, so I'm going to hand it off.
All right. So as I was saying, in this portion, we're going to go ahead and talk about the process that we use to design these lessons. And as I said, through part of this lesson, you will see what the teacher perspective looks like, and then we'll switch over so you can see what the student perspective looks like, and Celia will take over that, and we'll kind of go back and forth. Again, we wanted you to see what it looks like, what the workflow looks like. So as always, we want to get started with the standards, gathering our resources. You also need to think about prioritizing the instruction to digitize. Not everything that we do in our classroom every day can be digitized, but think about those kinds of topics. And we're going to go deeper into each of these. And we started with the standards. So as Celia shared earlier, if you have the slide deck, you can go to 2 different sources for the standards here. We are a standards-driven district. So this is where you can have the standards easily accessible no matter where you are at. Resources. This is probably the most time-consuming portion of designing these lessons, is being able to get our resources, putting them together, and then organize them in a way that will be effective for our students. Note that you, looking at some of your feedback that we have seen, a lot of you stated that you are you're very familiar with using the Maravillas and Wonders curriculum through Connect Ed. So that's really good to hear. But that's not the only place where you can gather text, complex text that will meet our students' needs. Epic was mentioned already, and News Ella is also available. Articles from Achieve 3000. So all of these are a resource that we can use to gather as we develop these lessons. And you will see some examples in a little bit. Celia, you want to say something?
Just to reiterate that, like, a lot of these companies, including Newsella and Epic, have opened up their content because of all this that's happening. And so I know that Newsella just recently opened up their content, like including social studies and science reading. So if you haven't checked it out already, I would highly suggest that.
And I don't know if you noticed that, but this lesson that we're actually going to model in the process will actually be all language arts. We will kind of, after we model this whole lesson, we will give you access to a couple of other lessons just to give you ideas on what it could look like. But this will be a language arts lesson. And, it's pretty rough, but hopefully it gives you an idea as what we need to do on here. So really important, just like in any of our lessons in our classroom, engaging our students or building or accessing background knowledge or building background knowledge could be really important. And Google actually has, the question feature built in that allows you to ask short answer questions or multiple choice questions. Not only are you able to ask a question, students respond, but you can also add things, to stimulate their thinking. It could be a picture, it could be a video. So it could be maybe an article for them to read or something that will just, get their attention and engage them. So you can decide what that looks like. In the example that we're going to show you, there's actually a picture that they will access. So at this point right now, I'm going to actually go ahead and go into a classroom and actually show you how to do this live right here. So we'll see how this works out. So here is our remote learning class that I've created. We talked earlier about the different tabs on here, the stream, classwork, people, and grades. If you notice, I already have, I have 2 students in my class here, but here's the stream. Like we said, most of your time in the student science will be spent in the classwork section here. And what we're going to do is you would start with the create. You will get this drop-down menu that, and there's a question on here to engage students. You can go ahead and, and type the question on there. What is your favorite fairy tale that you have read? Okay, so there is the question you would add. You could go ahead and add instructions on here. Please closely look at the attached image and answer the question. Okay. Be sure to use proper grammar. Correct here. All right, so there's my question along with instructions. I'm not gonna, now what you can do is you can go ahead and add resource on it. So I'm gonna click add here, and I'm gonna remember when you add things, you can add things from your Google Drive. It could be a link, it could be a file, YouTube video, to be determined there. But I'm gonna go ahead and go with getting resource that I've created already in my Google Drive. So the beauty of Google Drive is that you have access to all these resources. And actually what I'm looking for here is I'm going to look for, I have a lot of resources on here. I'm going to go ahead and have the students actually take a look at this picture here. Okay. And there, again, the directions are for them to take a look at this image and then respond to the question here. Once I have added that resource, I want to go ahead, and this is going to be, remember, 2 types of questions. It's going to be short answer. And then I can go ahead. One of the things that I'm going to do here, and we'll talk more about this as we go through this process, is I'm going to go ahead and add a topic. This is going to help me organize my lessons for students, and we'll talk about later about how to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and create one called ELA demo lesson. I was just told to slow down. Thank you. I apologize. I'm talking so fast, but I will slow down. All right, so there is my topic that I'm going to go ahead and create. I am ready to ask the question. So here the question is asked. So let me show you what this looks like as a teacher. And now what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to what it looks like for a student. So Celia will take over here as a student.
All right, so I was already added to the classroom, like George mentioned. And so, if students were on the actual classroom, they would get this little pop-up saying, hey, something's new, and you can just show it. So here's a question that George posed to me as a student. Students just click on it. Here's the question. What is your favorite fairy tale? Again, any kind of resource that you've added onto it, students will have. They would answer over here on the side. We do want to just quickly mention that we've noticed before that some teachers have commented that by mistake, some students will end up answering down here. But I want to remind you that George mentioned earlier that this is actually a setting. And so if you want to disable class comments, then this box wouldn't be here. But technically, sometimes, again, if students, depending on their familiarity with it, they might get confused, but technically their answer's over here. They would type in their answer.
As Celia is typing in her answer, I just wanted to say that, think about your purpose on there. Maybe if you're barely training your students, it would be good to not allow them to comment yet, but as they get better at this, maybe you want to facilitate those classroom discussions, so then you could open it up so that they are able to respond. Like, let's say I say, my favorite fairy tale is Aladdin. Somebody else could respond to that, one of my classmates. So again, think about your purpose.
So once the student, in this case, because it's question, they would type in their answer, they would click turn in and submit their answer. And so on the student's part, that's all that they need to do.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my screen so you can see what happened now. Again, this is all the workflow. What happens now as a teacher, and what do I see here? So I'm going to go ahead and you may have to refresh your screen on here. So when I refresh my screen here, I will see the assignment here. If I click on the assignment, you will see that it tells me, it tells me the information that I have, how many people it's been assigned to, how many students have turned it in. So this is a really good way for you to quickly gauge, how many more students still need to turn in their work. Okay, so that is what it could look like. I could also open this up to view the question. And again, this is the teacher perspective here. You can see that Celia has turned it in. Josh still hasn't turned it in. He must be busy. But as you can see here, here is Celia's response here. And I can, if you know, if here, if you're going to use the gradebook feature here, I could go ahead and just type in the grade for Celia, and then she will get that on her end. But again, we're not going to spend time on that yet. Right now, it's just about the lesson design. So that is what it looks like for, you know, that's how the workflow looks like for between teacher and student. All right. So we're going to go ahead now that you know, we got the students engaged. We're going to talk about, you know, text for close reading or text for whatever purpose you know, you have in mind on here. Know that there's options here. If there's a class book that you're reading, you know, I know that some of you with the little ones, you may have a big book that you're using. You can go ahead and use that. Here, for example, we have the Lightning Thief, you know, and what I'm saying is if you have access to a digital version of it, or even take a screenshot of it with your phone and upload it and post it for students so that they have the text in front of them. So that would be an option there. You know, I happen to have this book in digital format, so I would take a screenshot about what I'm reading or what I want the students to read and post it in Classroom here. You also have the option of a digital book. We talked about Epic. But if you have other sources, those are fine too. In fact, in the example that we're going to show you in a little bit, we're actually going to go ahead and use Epic. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Digital articles are also something that you can do, you know, whether it's Achieve 3000 or Newsela. Those are two tools you can use. And of course, you can post them in Classroom either as images or PDFs. So I believe both of those programs, you have the option to download PDFs, and then you can attach those PDFs as part of the assignment. Finally, like I keep stressing, and I'm so glad to hear this, is most of you said that you know how to access and you know, the curriculum, our language arts curriculum, Wonders and Maravillas. So if you are using that, you can also again take screenshots from that, or assign them in the way that your students may already know how to do using that platform, the Connect Ed platform there from the portal. So let's go ahead and actually show you what this looks like. So sorry, I apologize here. Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Celia. I was going to jump over to the text center, but some things that we may need to provide here is some support for our students. You know, we don't have them in a class, so what can we do to support them? I'm going to show you in the demonstration an example of a support, but you can also go ahead and, you know, ask questions. The question feature in Google, which we've already talked about, go ahead and ask questions through the reading, or, you know, or after they get to a certain portion of the reading, so that they can respond to that. Another possibility is creating a Google Doc with guiding questions, you know, for checking comprehension. And just so that you know, these are all, this is a link. It's not going to take you to this copy of it, even though you will have access to it later. This will just take you to Google, to the Google tools, so you can create these types of of resources. Finally, maybe you want to create a graphic organizer to help them put their thinking, you know, organize their thinking, and again, to help them go back to the text and use it as they're learning. Before I give you an example, if you want additional graphic organizers to support your students, you can click up here. Not only will you get access to a whole bunch of graphic organizers that are used to Google Draw, but there's actually a whole little lesson on how to create your own graphic organizer. So take a look at that when you get a chance. All right, so let's see what this looks like as a teacher to go ahead and assign this piece on here. So once again, I'm going to go back to my class. I'm going to start in the classwork section. I'm going to create an assignment this time. Remember, last time it was a question. This time, I'm going to go ahead and create an assignment. All right, the assignment is going to be called the 3 Little Pigs. All right, and the instructions are going to be watch or read the digital. Okay, actually it's not watch or read, because it's actually a read out loud. Listen to the read out loud attached to this assignment, and then respond. Oops, I'll fix that in a second. complete the graphic organizer. So there we go. Let me fix this quickly here. All right, so now we want to go ahead and add our resources. Again, beautiful thing about Google Drive is you can get these from anywhere. So I already have these resources in my Google Drive. So I'm going to click Access from Google Drive here. I'm going to go ahead and find my Read Out Loud, which is actually right here. Again, this is straight from Epic. And one of the great things about Epic, for those who have never used it, is that there is some Read Out Louds where the program will read these to our students. Again, we may not have students that are fluent at the level that we want them to be. So that's a great support there, or a scaffold for them. I'm going to go ahead and add to this a graphic organizer. And I want to go ahead and make sure that I point out a couple of things with regards to sharing, because earlier when I practiced this, I made that mistake. So a couple of things. For each of the resources that you add in Google Classroom, you have the option to change how the students interact with it. They can just view this. That's fine, because the video, they just need to be able to view it. So I'm going to leave that as view. In this other one on here, you can have the students be able to edit or make a copy of the file. Be sure that if this is think of this as your master, you don't want all the students going in there and changing your master. So we don't want to give them edit access for this assignment. Now, there is times where you do want to give them edit access to one particular document, but not in this case. I want to make instead a copy for each student. Think of this as your copy machine or your Xerox machine. So there we go. It will automatically make a copy of this graphic organizer for each student. Finally, over here on the right-hand side, remember about organizing your lesson. I'm going to go ahead and put this under the same topic that I had created earlier, ELA demo lesson. So now I'm going to go ahead. I believe I'm ready here to assign it. And you'll see what this looks like in a second. And then we're going to switch over to Celia, so you can see the student perspective. Notice that by me selecting that the topic was ELA demo lesson, it puts this assignment under the same topic, and that's a good way to package your lessons. So now let's go over to Celia so she can show you the student perspective.
All right, so I'm still in the classroom, and I head over here, see that there's a new assignment. When I open it, this is what I would get as a student. There's the video that was linked by my teacher. My work is over here, and so I would watch it from here. If I needed to do some kind of work, like in this one, I would just click on it. Because George made a copy for each of us, then what I'm typing here is my own. And so again, you have to pay attention to whether or not you want this to be collaborative or you want everybody to have a copy of their own. But students would fill out their graphic organizer. Let's just say that I filled all this out for the sake of time. I'm going to close that because Google's awesome and it saves everything for me anyway. And so as a teacher, as a student, I would just come back here to the assignment, and I do need to go over here and click turn in. And so even though I've done the work in the actual file, I'm going to go back over here. It's going to ask me to confirm whether or not I want to turn it in. So we're going to turn that in. And so as a student, my job is done pretty much there. I do want to take a second to answer a couple of questions before we send it back to the teacher. Someone asked from Barden if this is being recorded. Yes, this is all being recorded. No worries. If you want to watch this again or you think you missed something, no worries. And there was another question about how students access Google Classroom, particularly if maybe they're not familiar with it or they've never done it before. Just a quick reminder that Google Classroom is an icon on students' portals. And so all that they really would need to do is from their portal, click on the Google Classroom icon, and it'll take them straight to their account on Google Classroom, easy access. So now that we've answered those questions, we're going to get back to George.
All right, so the final piece of this is assessment. So one of the best ways for us to take a look at student learning is to take a look at student work. So as students are turning in your work, turning in their work, you have access to being able to give them feedback and being able to grade them. on how well they understood the assignment and completion. Other options include Wonders. We know that the Wonders curriculum, again, through Connect Ed, has some assessment pieces. Think about also creating assessment pieces through a screencast. A student could create a response, a video of them telling you about their learning or what they learned in the process. So screencasts are a really good way to get an idea of what students are learning or what they're thinking. Finally, that question feature in Google Classroom, can't stress that enough. Just like with our demonstration lesson, we opened up with a question. Why not ask a question at the end again to check for comprehension? So those are some ideas for you on how we can assess students. There is other options. Some of you that are really savvy with things like Google Forms or maybe you use some other platform. That's not the only. There's other ways to do that, and we will kind of try to add to the website some other ways to assess students and how to use those tools. Oops, sorry. All right. So we were also talking about how we would give you additional examples. So we've created a couple of other examples for you. This is an example of a math lesson. Again, we started here with the standards. And this lesson actually includes, some engagement or prior knowledge, or perhaps even review. And it's actually in video form here that you will see the students will watch this video, and then they will have to do something. They will have to react with a little piece on here about what about the review on there, again, to get them thinking about the topic. So that's to engage students and get prior knowledge or review. Then that you could add I apologize. You could add a lesson that demonstrates, a little short video that has a short lesson on here. Again, we don't expect you to be sitting up in front of your webcam for half an hour. Really try to keep these videos, 3 to 5 minutes for maximum effectiveness. As you can see here, I took actually this video on ratios from, I believe this came from Khan Academy. So yeah, so this video on there is there. So they would watch this video, and then they have some practice here, some work that they need to do under some lesson practice and assessment. So this is the way that it's packaged. At the end of this screencast, we will be adding this lesson to the classroom that we've been using, so that if you want to take a look at it more closely, really click on these things and see what it looks like, you will be able to add yourself as a student and then be able to access these resources. So that's one example of a lesson that we have for you. Celia is going to go ahead and give you a second one.
So this is an example that I came up with, and it's largely based off a lot of work that I'd previously done. Shout out to VRB. So last year I was in 5th grade, and so I started with a 5th grade language arts standard, and I believe I picked a writing standard, but it is also tied to some reading standards. So in this lesson that I put together, I would have started with a fluency. And so, like, for example, so this is a screenshot of what it would have looked like in Google Classroom. I started with fluency. This is a PDF from Wonders, actually. And so I just took a PDF of that fluency, sent it out to students. And so my directions might be, hey, you need to use Screencastify to record yourself reading this fluency passage. So that might be the first step in their assignment. And then maybe their engagement piece is watching a video on endangered animals. And so this is a link on it to endangered animals. And after they've watched that, the directions ask them to tell me one thing that they've learned and one thing that they still have questions on. So this is just a question feature on Google Classroom. Next up, one of their main assignments is the reading comprehension main reading. And so in order to do that, I gave them directions on here. So the directions are read each article, identify text structure, and create a thinking map. I just want to point out that these particular texts were from Newsella. And so these are the 3 sources, each noting a different kind of endangered animal, and then a blank Google drawing for them to create a thinking map. And after they identify what the text structure is for them, then they would go into Google Draw, make their thinking maps or graphic organizers to assess their comprehension. That might be what I look for. But again, because I started with a writing standard, another piece, of course, has to be the writing. And so this part is actually, again, another assignment, but this is kind of the culminating assignment. And so the directions, because again, I'm coming from BRB and we were a storm school. And so we always took these steps in my class. And so even the do what chart, the hand plan, their draft, and their final draft, all of those steps for me in my classroom were done on a Google Doc. And so I would give students maybe like a T chart for the do what chart, just blank, and they would fill in the do's and the what's. I would give them a blank, like 6-row table for their hand plan, which they would fill in, and then they could word process their drafts and their final drafts, and then turn in, obviously, again here on Google Classroom. But again, we want to stress that these are just examples. Like George and I just, we're trying to go through the process that everybody else is trying to go through and trying to come up with some ideas for you on what you can do as we move forward. We might have a question, so we might pause a second.
Sorry about that. The question is, when I place a video in Google Classroom, it asks them to download it. Oh, good question, actually. So what happens is whenever you create a video or a screencast and you save it in Google Drive, you upload it to Google Drive, it normally takes a little time for Google Drive to process it, and then it becomes available. So you're right, Ms. Regalado from Frank Paul. If you try to if you share an assignment immediately, and it's a video you have just completed, the students may not be able to access it immediately. It will ask them instead to download it, which would work, but we don't want students downloading that because they have very limited storage in their Chromebooks. So they'll just have to wait a little bit longer. You know that it's processed because when you first upload a video, it looks just like the little, think of the outtake tool that they use when they make a movie. And then and it's red. And then once the video is ready to be viewed by students, it will actually show a little picture of the video of what you're actually trying to show to students. Okay, so that was a good question. Thank you for that. And then the second one that we have is there a way to view without downloading? Yes, I hope that was that was related, and hopefully my answer previously answered that. And then it said, okay, that's so good. Looks like it's not just Ms. Regalado. 3 of you have asked, so thank you for that question. Excellent question, actually.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go into some workflow considerations and some best practices ideas for you all in terms of Google Classroom. And so we've been touching on these as we've gone along, but we wanted to give you another opportunity to think about this. Some things to consider. The first thing you might want to consider are due dates. So when you assign an assignment, so this would be what you would see for an assignment. You would title it, add any resources like George has been showing you, change permissions. You might assign points if you're using the gradebook, but down here at the bottom is where you would potentially put in a due date. If you do, it's going to pop up like this. You're going to either select a date or time or both, when you want it to be due. We brought this up as a consideration because we think that it is fairly flexible, and we just want you to kind of think of different ways that you might want to approach this. And so in one sense, providing a due date could create structure for students. Might be a flexible due date where maybe you don't assign due dates by that same day because maybe students just, again, things are changing every day at home and they may not be able to get to it that specific day. But maybe if your due dates are maybe week long, then it'll give them a little bit of flexibility, but still some structure. But also keep in mind that it may provide to be useful if only as a flag for you, because when students turn in something past the due date, you'll get a notification like kind of a little red alert by student. And so if you were to open an assignment and you start looking that there's one student in particular who has been turning in assignments late consistently, or we're 1 or 2 weeks out and they've done nothing, then maybe not so much in just like a meaningless due date, but it could serve you to pay attention to that and like maybe reach out and connect with that family and check in with them to see if they need anything or if everything's okay. And so again, you wouldn't know, it wouldn't be as easily to point out those students if you didn't have a due date. But again, like we're all trying to figure this out, and so like there probably should be some flexibility, but again, consider that the way that you use due dates could be valuable for you. So, but that's completely up to you. We also want you to consider topics. And so, as George has been mentioning, topics are a way to organize all of those assignments that are going to be in your Google Classroom. And so again, very similarly, this is the window where you would create an assignment. Again, all those things. And then down here below the due date is a topic. You can create the topic straight from here or just select it as George has been doing. And so once you create those topics, we wanted to give you some ideas on what it would look like. And so on the left-hand side, these topics are by either content area. So maybe you do all of your ELA or all of your math together. They would group them like this. Maybe it's by unit. So this is what it would look like. However, if you use topics to denote dates, for example, it might look like this example over here on the right. And then assignments are going to be grouped by date. And so this would be the work for March 16th. This is the work all grouped together. Again, there are pros and cons to both. And so again, it's just one of those things to take into account and to consider.
We've gotten a comment on here. We know that this could be a lot of information that's going out to you. We want to take 5-minute break actually, but we will be done within the next few minutes with our portion on here. So we're gonna finish up and then we'll go ahead and go into a short break. Okay?
Yeah. Or we're just about done, but we hear you for sure.
Yes.
So another opportunity for you to think about how you're going to do this is thinking about feedback and commenting from teachers. And so this is an assignment that I sent out, and this is the students' work. I would either create feedback in terms of grading, create actual private comments via text. I could add individual comments into the assignments. And if something needed to be changed or edited or revised, then here's where I would be returning work to students. But again, it's just another way to keep that connection with students through all of this. And so we are at our last category, so we're just about done. We're going to cover a couple of quick resources for the upcoming times, and then we will finish up.
Okay. So really quick, some of you may want to get, like we've been saying, you may want to get additional access to these lessons that we created, demonstration lessons for you or examples. So one thing that you can do is, you can go ahead and join this class. Here's the class code, so you can join this class. You'll be joining as a student, so you want to join as a student. And then what you do is you can actually take a look, delve deeper into the assignments and the examples we have provided for you. And while some of the lessons are not in there yet, they will be there by the end of the day today. In fact, within the next hour or so, we'll put them up in this classroom. So if you want to join, there's the class code. Finally, we are working on a website around all of these tools and these resources, these screencasts, these live streams that we're doing on here. It will be available, as Josh said, hopefully at the latest on Wednesday. It will be available from this bit.ly here. And you can go ahead, there'll be a tab that says remote instruction. You will have a ton of other resources there, and we'll continue to add through this as we go through this process. Okay. Finally, sorry, I apologize. So once you click on remote instruction, it's going to take you to the website. Right now, all we have is a skeleton. It's not live yet, but a lot of the tools will be found there, especially under tools for teaching. If you need additional, how do I create a question again? How do I attach a link? Those kinds of resources will be there in short little videos that you can watch to help you remember those things. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to close it up with with Josh, kind of letting you know what's going to happen, and then we will go on a little break. So Josh.
All right. Welcome back to my screen, everybody. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. You can see this timer on the screen, and then we are going to come back and do Screencastify, which will be far, far shorter. And before we head into Screencastify, but not before the end of the 10 minutes, we will go into some of the other questions that weren't directly related. We're not necessarily going to be able to get to everything today, all of your questions. So some of those will warrant email follow-ups, but I will do my best to get to some of those questions. So I'm going to stop talking now and take a break, stretch your legs. See you in 10. And we are back. So welcome back. We have some questions before we get going with Screencastify. So I'm going to throw it to George. So George, take it over.
Sorry about that little technical difficulty, but one of the questions that came up was regarding joining this demo class. So again, you will need this code that you see here, but what you want to do, what I failed to show you, and I can see why this would be difficult for those of you in the primary grades that maybe haven't used this too much. What you want to do is, again, here's my remote learning class. For you to join it, you actually will start from the classes page. So these are all the classes that I'm either a teacher in or I'm a student in. So what you will want to do is you will click this plus sign here, and you're going to join a class. And when this comes up, that code that I gave you, this is where you would insert the code, and then you'll click join, and you'll be able to join our class. Okay, sorry for that. Thank you, Ms. Sandoval at Montebella. Yay, Montebella, for asking that question. All right, so that's the question that I had. So I'm going to pass it back over to Josh so that he can go ahead and continue with this.
Okay, so as I said, we were going to answer a couple questions. First off, lots of teachers have been submitting resources. Shout out to Miss Roberts at MLK, and Mr. Ramos at Barden. Go Barden! We will aggregate those ideas and suggestions and make them available on that website, which we're hoping to have live by Wednesday. Also, just to kind of reiterate, we got some texts and direct emails while we were trying to do this live stream. Again, please send them to edtech@alisal.org. That way, all three of the team members can get those resources. Also coming in from Ms. Roberts at MLK. She suggested QuickTime Player avoids the 5-minute limit, and that's absolutely true if you know how to use QuickTime. We won't be demoing QuickTime, but keep in mind that's a teacher-only solution, which goes into another question we had about Screencastify, which we're about to get into. Is Screencastify available for our students? The teacher said, I can't remember exactly who, my apologies. Is it available for students? It's just in my browser. Yes, Screencastify is in every student's browser. We push it out across the entire district. So all the way from Mr. Koenig to wee little kindergartners at all of our schools that have Chromebooks. Screencastify is built into all their browsers, which is why we're focusing on that, because it's already on our student devices. There was a question about, do we have to use Google Classroom? Can we use Seesaw? Yes. I had another question about delivering instruction through ClassDojo, and I'm afraid I'm gonna have to say that we'd prefer you don't deliver actual instruction through ClassDojo. And here's the reason why. Is first off, it's not a district adopted platform. And therefore, we cannot guarantee that we are complying with student data privacy laws. We know that we are with Seesaw, and we know that we are with Google Classroom. With Dojo, it's fine for communication as long as we're not, excuse me, sending personally identifiable information. But there's some concerns around complying with student data privacy laws around Classroom Dojo or ClassDojo. So for like homeschool communication, it's fine. For delivering actual instruction, we'd prefer that you don't. There were a bunch of questions about Meet. We're using Meet to live stream, but you can do it as a video call. And here's the difference. A live stream is one-way communication. A video call is omnidirectional. Everyone can talk. There's a side panel chat. We will be doing a PD on it later. It will be great for doing, like, as Mr. Ramos suggested from Barden, a fishbowl, classroom discussions, et cetera, et cetera. That's why we're opening it. We're not bringing on Meet because that means it's not integrated with our Google tools. There's some privacy concerns, and it would be yet another thing to add on. We're trying to use the tools that we have right now. And hopefully you understand that. So let's talk about Screencastify. So I'm going to switch to Elena's plan. But what I really want you to do is look up here in the corner on my browser. I have all these little goodies. And these are Chrome extensions. And the one that's an orange arrow with a camera on it is Screencastify. If you hover over a Chrome extension, you will see what it is. I'm also being mindful that we got a comment, could we slow down and talk more slowly so that you can follow along? We are full of adrenaline and we are going to do our best. Also a reminder, this entire broadcast is being recorded, and as soon as the video is done processing, it will be webbed and made available. All of the Livestream PD broadcasts will be webbed and made available on that website. Until the website is done, we will email them directly to you. In any case, and we will also send some additional resources on Screencastify because there are no slides for this. It's a pretty simple tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and live demo it. If you've never used Screencastify before, the same is true for your students. When you click here, oh look, it's behaving for me. So I'm going to click sign in with Google. Now, if you've been signing in with multiple accounts, well, apparently it just let me sign in. If you've never signed in before, you will have a thing where it asks you to pick which account, pick your Alisol account. Then it will ask you if it has permission to store things in your Google Drive. Please click allow. The other thing we love about Screencastify is it stores it automatically in a web format right into your Google Drive. QuickTime, as Ms. Roberts suggested, is a great tool, but it means once you've recorded it, you've got to get it up into your Google Drive and make sure the permissions are accurate so that it can be shared with your kids. So you see I've got 3 little messages there. It's going to tell me that I have some things. So once we are in Screencastify, we have a couple of choices. So I'm going to zoom in here, and hopefully this will be a little bit easier for you to see. So we have to make sure that our microphone is on and working, and we have the choice to embed the webcam. If you've never used it before, I'm going to zoom back out for a second. You might get some pop-ups around here in this area that are asking you, says Screencastify wants to use your microphone and your camera. Please click allow on both of them. I know plenty of you cover up your laptop camera for using Screencastify. If you're going to embed a picture of yourself, you're going to have to take that sticker off. So we have a couple of choices. We can record a single browser tab, which means just like one tab at a time. We can record the desktop, or you can do webcam only. Now, why would I want to do webcam only? We had another question about recording maybe a demonstration lesson where somebody was on the overhead or a teacher was writing on the whiteboard. This would be a great use of webcam only. If you wanted to record good morning announcement or weekly announcement or just video reminders, especially for our younger kids for whom large amounts of text might not be the best thing, then webcam only would be there. Under more options, there's a countdown before you get started. You can have it as many as, I keep mine at 3 seconds. If you are trying to set up to record on your whiteboard, 10 seconds might be good, but there are your choices. There's some drawing tools on the screen as well that will show. So I have I'm going to go ahead and embed the webcam, but I'm going to record my whole desktop. And then you'll notice in browser tab and desktop, we have some other options. The drawing tools I think are really neat. And there's a click visual effect that this turns on. And then in the browser tab, if you're showing something in a browser and you want, for example, if you were watching a video in your screencast and you wanted the audio from the video, then we would turn tab audio on. So I'm going to record the whole desktop. So here's what this looks like. I record Notice my little face in the corner here. And now I could say just the application, which in this case would be just Google Chrome, or I could say the entire screen, which if I were switching between, let's say, QuickTime and Chrome, it would show the desktop background, etc. I'm just going to say this entire application and click share. Now we're going to get our countdown. Once the countdown is done, we are recording. It's as simple as that. I can click on my little embedded webcam and make it big. I can flip it back and forth. I don't know why you would do that, but there you are. Now watch my cursor. Whenever I click, and this is what makes it really good for working with students, is you'll notice that red circle effect. That is automatic, and it helps draw viewers' attention to where you are clicking. Now, if you click down here, you can turn that effect on or off. You can also switch to a spotlight effect. So when I click here, I have now the red circle flashing, and I have that nifty spotlight effect. I'm going to turn the spotlight off. We also have some drawing tools. So on the video, I can draw, "You did a good job. Mr. Harris was never an art teacher." I can change the pen color, give it some eyelashes. Okay. And then, of course, the eraser. Now, I'm not drawing over the top of Elena's plan. I am simply drawing in the video, and as soon as the video's done, that drawing will go away. So down here at the bottom, it says Screencastify is sharing a window. If I click stop sharing, then I stop recording. If you just want to hide this, then click hide, and it goes away. Now to finish, I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to click stop. Now automatically, this video pops up. It starts out muted because it's playing to show you what it looks like. It happened really fast because this is a short video, but it was saving to Google Drive, and now it says copy shareable link. So it is automatically saved in a folder that is automatically created for you called Screencastify. When I click copy shareable link, it is turning on the share permissions that anyone with the link can view. Now, if I were using Google Classroom or Screencastify, deja vu, this is like the inception of screencasting. If I were using Google Classroom or Screencastify, I could mail that to students. It's always a good practice to name it demo screencast. I might put the date. And then this is what it, whoops. Then it will be named this in my Google Drive. I can grab the share link. There is a super simple share to Google Classroom. And if I open that up, I can choose my class. I can choose an action. I can make this an assignment, use it to ask a question or make an announcement. Maybe I'll ask a question and click go. And so now the question is, what do you think of my awesome screencast? And then ask. Now, it does not have to be a question. Again, it can go into an assignment. It can go into an announcement. When I'm done here, I can close the tab or I can click view to go see it. And really, that's pretty much all there is to it. Right now, there is that 5-minute time limit, but we're working to eliminate that and hope to have that done by week's end. I'm going to stop presenting and let you see. So that's Livestream PD for today. We thank you all for hanging in there. We thank you all for your questions and comments and understanding that this is our first time. Thank you for reporting some of the technical issues that you were having. Unfortunately, some folks asked about, can you make the text bigger? We'll make the text bigger on our slides in the future. There's no way to make the picture really much bigger. In any case, you're probably ready for lunch, or maybe to start thinking about and applying these tools. There's questions about me sharing my slides in the beginning part, and I think mostly what folks want is that 4 pillars, the communicate, teach, connect, assess, and I will definitely make that available. Not sure why you would exactly want the rest of it, but yeah, all our resources from today will be made available to you, I promise. In any case, thank you very much. On behalf of the entire EdTech department, we appreciate you paying attention and attending, and we look forward to the rest of our broadcast this week and to serving you and supporting you as we all move forward into this journey. Thank you so much. We are signing off now.